The sun had just begun to rise over the bustling city airport, painting the runway in soft hues of gold and crimson. Travelers moved in every direction, executives, families, and tourists all hurrying toward their gates. Among them was Marcus Reed, a successful African-American CEO known for his calm demeanor and sharp intelligence. He had worked his way up from poverty, turning his small startup into a global logistics empire worth billions. Marcus boarded the first-class cabin of Flight 409 bound for London. He was scheduled to speak at an international business summit, where leaders from across the world would gather. His company had recently secured a major humanitarian transport deal, moving essential goods to underserved regions. This speech could open even more doors, but at that moment, all he wanted was a quiet flight and a good breakfast before diving into the day. The first-class section gleamed with luxury, white linen seats, soft lighting, and attendants dressed immaculately in navy uniforms. The air smelled faintly of coffee and leather. Marcus nodded politely to the flight attendant who greeted him. Her name tag read Samantha. She smiled, but with a tone that felt slightly forced. He placed his laptop in front of him and began reading his notes. The plane's engines roared to life, and soon they were cutting through the clouds. The captain announced smooth skies ahead. The passengers relaxed and soft music played in the cabin. When the meal service began, Samantha moved down the aisle serving plates of eggs, croissants, and smoked salmon. Marcus waited patiently, typing on his laptop. When she reached him, she looked at her list and frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "We've run out of the first-class breakfast option. Would you like something from economy instead?" Marcus blinked. "You ran out?" "But you've just started serving," he said, still polite but surprised. "Yes, it seems there was a miscount," she replied curtly. "You can have a sandwich or wait until we find something later." The tone in her voice was sharp, dismissive even. Marcus noticed how she spoke gently to other passengers but seemed impatient with him. He took a deep breath. "All right, I'll wait," he said quietly, as time passed. Other passengers enjoyed their meals, sipping coffee and chatting. Samantha returned only once to refill drinks, skipping Marcus entirely. The man sitting beside him, a middle-aged investor, gave him an uncomfortable glance. He whispered, "That's not right. They can't treat you like that." Marcus smiled slightly. "It's fine," he said, but inside it wasn't fine at all. He had faced this kind of quiet discrimination before, the kind that came wrapped in politeness but stung all the same. He remembered being told as a young man that people like you don't belong in boardrooms. He had ignored it then, and he intended to ignore it now. But something about the coldness in Samantha's tone made his chest tighten. An hour later, she returned carrying a tray from economy. "This is all we have left," she said, placing a small, cold sandwich before him without making eye contact. Marcus looked at the meal. It wasn't about the food anymore. It was about respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, refusing to cause a scene. As the flight continued, he overheard whispers from other crew members near the galley. A younger attendant said softly, "Why didn't he just take it earlier?" And Samantha replied, "People like that always want special treatment." Marcus froze. Those words echoed in his head like a slap. People like that. He closed his laptop, sat back, and stared out the window at the endless sky. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. When the plane finally began its descent into Heathrow, Marcus had already made a decision. Not one out of revenge, but out of principle. He believed in accountability, not humiliation. After the landing, as passengers prepared to disembark, Samantha approached him again. "Hope you had a pleasant flight," she said without sincerity. Marcus looked up calmly and replied, "You'll remember this flight, Samantha," and walked out of the cabin without another word. Outside, his private car awaited, and his assistant handed him his phone. "Sir, the airline's regional director is expecting you for your business partnership meeting in an hour." Marcus smiled faintly. "Perfect timing," he said. His mind was already clear. He knew what to do next. The flight had ended, but something much larger was about to begin. When Marcus stepped into his London hotel suite, the morning light streamed through tall glass windows, illuminating the skyline like a promise of new beginnings. Yet beneath his calm exterior, something restless stirred. The flight had ended hours ago, but the humiliation still lingered in his chest like smoke after a fire. He wasn't a man who acted on impulse. Every decision Marcus made was measured, deliberate, strategic. That was how he had built an empire. Not with anger, but with control. But this incident on Flight 409 wasn't about ego or emotion. It was about the quiet way people were still judged, still treated differently even when they sat in first-class seats they had earned. His assistant, Clara, entered the suite holding a tablet. "Sir, the airline's regional director confirmed the lunch meeting," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Good, I'll attend," he replied. Then after a brief pause, he added, "Before that, file a formal report to their corporate office, include every detail, every remark, and the crew member's name, Samantha." Clara hesitated. "Do you want it to go public?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "Not yet, I don't want headlines. I want accountability." As Clara began typing, Marcus walked to the window. The city below moved like a living machine, and people rushing, cars honking, opportunities passing by every second. He thought of how far he had come, from the son of a single mother in Detroit to the head of a billion-dollar logistics company. He'd faced worse than rude words, but this time he felt something heavier. The world couldn't keep pretending such behavior was harmless. Within hours, the email reached the airline's headquarters. It wasn't an angry rant, it was a professional, detailed account of what had happened. Marcus described every moment calmly, but clearly emphasizing the dismissive tone, the whispered comments, the lack of respect. He didn't demand compensation, didn't even ask for an apology. All he wrote at the end was, "I hope this reflects the kind of training your team receives in representing your brand." The message spread faster than expected. By evening, it was circulating among senior management. The CEO of the airline, Eleanor Briggs, read it herself and frowned. "A man of his reputation and influence," she murmured. "This could destroy our image if handled poorly." The next morning, Marcus arrived at the airline's London headquarters for his scheduled business meeting, a partnership negotiation that had been planned months earlier. He was greeted by polite executives, but their smiles were strained. They knew who he was, and now what he had written. Eleanor personally met him in the conference room, tall, composed, and clearly anxious. "Mr. Reed, thank you for meeting us," she began. "Before we proceed, I must sincerely apologize for your experience on our flight. The behavior you described is unacceptable, and I assure you we're investigating immediately." Marcus looked at her evenly. "I appreciate that," he said, "but I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to discuss professionalism. I believe your company represents thousands of employees who do their jobs well. One person's attitude shouldn't ruin that, but it should be corrected." Eleanor nodded. "Absolutely, we'll handle it," she promised. The meeting proceeded smoothly after that. They discussed future collaborations between his logistics firm and the airline's cargo operations. But behind the polite conversation, Marcus sensed tension. He didn't want to use his power to harm, but he also believed in setting standards. That evening, while relaxing in the hotel lounge, Clara approached him again. "Sir, there's been an internal memo from the airline," she said quietly. "They've suspended the entire first-class crew for review, not just Samantha." Marcus leaned back surprised. "All of them?" "Yes, apparently management believes that the entire team should be held accountable for allowing the behavior." He sighed deeply. He hadn't asked for that. His intention was never revenge, but awareness still. He knew that sometimes real change only began when people were forced to confront their culture. The next day, as media outlets began catching whispers of the story, reporters started reaching out. "A billionaire CEO refuses to accept mistreatment at 30,000 feet. One headline teased. Clara showed him the draft. "Do we respond?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, let the story speak for itself," he said. But the silence only made it louder. Within 48 hours, the airline's PR team released a public statement. "We regret the incident involving our esteemed passenger, Mr. Marcus Reed, and have taken swift disciplinary action to uphold our service standards." What followed shocked everyone. Marcus was contacted by hundreds of employees from across the world, flight attendants, hotel staff, retail workers, all thanking him for standing up quietly but powerfully. Late that night, he sat by the window again, looking at the city lights below. Maybe, he thought, it takes one uncomfortable moment to remind people of dignity. He didn't want anyone fired, but he wanted change. The next morning, his phone rang. It was Eleanor again. "Mr. Reed," she said, "the investigation is done, and we'd like you to visit the training academy next week. We're revamping our service ethics program, and we'd like you to address our new recruits." The following week, the entire aviation industry buzzed with one name, Marcus Reed. His name had appeared not in a scandal, but in a story of quiet defiance. What started as a single incident aboard Flight 409 had now evolved into a full-scale reckoning within the airline world. Social media platforms flooded with comments. Hashtags like "Trage respect in the skies" and "Large first-class dignity" began trending. Ordinary passengers began sharing their own experiences, moments when they too had been overlooked, judged, or dismissed. Suddenly, Marcus's story wasn't just his. It belonged to everyone who had ever been treated as less than. Meanwhile, inside the airline headquarters, chaos brewed beneath calm smiles. The internal audit that Marcus's letter had sparked uncovered a troubling pattern. Several reports of bias and favoritism buried by mid-level managers. The CEO, Eleanor Briggs, realized that the issue went deeper than one rude attendant. It was a culture problem. Back in London, Marcus was focused on his business meetings, but the noise around him kept growing. His assistant, Clara, entered his suite with a worried look. "Sir, the media wants interviews, morning shows, newspapers, even international outlets," she said. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "No interviews," he said simply. "We didn't do this for attention." "But the world is listening," she pressed. "They're calling you the man who changed the skies." Marcus gave a small smile. "Then let them listen to the silence," he said. He knew that true impact wasn't made by shouting. It was made by holding steady when everyone else panicked. Across the ocean, Samantha, the flight attendant at the center of the incident, sat in a corporate hearing room. Her hands trembled slightly as she faced a panel of executives. "I didn't mean to offend him," she said defensively. "I was following procedure. We had a catering issue." One of the panel members, a senior HR director, looked at her sharply. "You were overheard saying people like that?" Samantha's face reddened. "It was taken out of context," she said, "but the damage was done." The airline's board decided that she and her immediate supervisor would be suspended pending further review. That same day, a journalist from Global Times published an article titled, "The Man Who Refused to Be Silent at 30,000 Feet." It painted Marcus not as a victim, but as a symbol. A man who demanded respect without demanding revenge. The story went viral. Millions shared it, especially young professionals and people of color who saw themselves in his calm resilience. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages of support. Old friends, colleagues, even political figures reached out. One message stood out, from his mother, Elaine Reed, a retired schoolteacher back in Detroit. Her text was simple. "Proud of you, son. Always remember what I told you. Dignity costs nothing but means everything." Marcus smiled at the words. He could almost hear her voice saying them. He had learned that lesson early, watching her navigate prejudice with quiet grace. It wasn't power that made a person strong, it was restraint. A week later, Marcus arrived at the airline's training academy as requested by Eleanor Briggs. Cameras flashed as he entered, but he didn't stop for interviews inside the auditorium. Hundreds of trainee flight attendants sat in neat rows, eyes wide with curiosity and admiration. Eleanor took the stage first. "Today," she said, "we're joined by a man whose courage reminded us what true service means. Mr. Marcus Reed." Applause filled the room. Marcus stepped forward. He didn't bring slides or notes, just his voice, calm but firm. "I didn't come here to lecture," he began. "I came to remind you that every passenger carries a story when you serve them. You're not just offering food or comfort. You're showing them whether this company respects them or not. Sometimes one sentence can uplift someone, and one careless word can scar them." The room was silent. Every trainee listened closely. "That flight," he continued, "taught me something too, that silence is powerful. But truth is louder when spoken with calmness. You don't have to raise your voice to change the world." After his speech, many trainees approached him, some with tears in their eyes. "Sir, I promise to remember your words," one young attendant said. Marcus smiled warmly. "That's all I ask," he replied outside. The airline's public relations team issued another statement, this time announcing a respect and inclusion initiative, inspired by Marcus's experience. They invited him to be an honorary advisor, and he agreed on one condition. "No publicity, just progress," he said. In the following months, the airline overhauled its training, introducing empathy workshops, cultural awareness programs, and new guidelines to ensure every passenger, regardless of race, background, or appearance, was treated with equal dignity. But while the world celebrated him, Marcus knew not everyone was pleased. Some critics accused him of using his influence unfairly, claiming he had cost innocent workers their jobs. Rumors began swirling that some senior crew members planned to retaliate. One evening, Clara approached him nervously. "Sir, there's a post going around. Someone from the crew leaked your personal information online," she said. Marcus looked up calmly. "Then we know who still hasn't learned the lesson," he replied quietly. He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at the glowing city below. The story had grown far beyond a single flight. It had become a movement, one that exposed both admiration and resentment. Marcus knew storms always followed change. But this time he was ready to face it because for him, this was no longer about a cold sandwich. It was about rewriting what respect meant at 30,000 feet. And soon the real turbulence was about to begin. As the weeks passed, the storm Marcus Reed had unintentionally stirred began to take on a life of its own. Newspapers still printed his name, television anchors debated his motives, and social media split into two loud camps: those who praised his quiet stand and those who accused him of destroying careers. Marcus ignored most of it, choosing instead to focus on his business expansion in Europe. Yet beneath the polished calm, a darker current was forming. Somewhere in a dimly lit bar near Heathrow Airport, a group of suspended flight attendants sat together nursing their drinks. The air was thick with resentment and defeat. At the center of the table sat Samantha, the woman whose words had started it all. Her face was pale, her hair tied carelessly, and her uniform long replaced by casual clothes. "They made me the villain," she muttered bitterly. "One misunderstanding and now my whole career's gone." Her colleague, Rachel, leaned closer. "They're not just blaming you, Sam, they're scared of him. That CEO has power, and they're trying to protect their image." Samantha slammed her glass on the table. "He ruined me," she whispered. "I can't get hired anywhere. Every airline knows my name now. Do you know what it feels like to lose everything over one flight?" Rachel hesitated. "Maybe you should just apologize. It might help." Samantha shook her head furiously. "No, I want him to feel what I felt. He humiliated me. Now it's his turn." She pulled out her phone and opened a hidden group chat, screenshots, photos, and rumors about Marcus began to circulate. Private moments taken by passengers during the flight, twisted into misleading captions within days. Fake posts appeared online suggesting Marcus had threatened the staff or demanded special treatment. The narrative began to shift subtly. Online commentators started asking, was the billionaire really a victim? The damage was quiet but effective. Marcus's PR team worked hard to block false stories, but they spread like wildfire. When Clara showed him the latest headlines, Marcus's expression didn't change. He read them calmly, then placed the tablet down. "Truth doesn't need to shout, Clara," he said softly. "It waits." But behind that calm voice, he knew this was no coincidence. Someone was orchestrating a smear campaign, and he needed to uncover who. Meanwhile, at the airline's corporate headquarters, Eleanor Briggs was losing sleep. The company's board demanded results. "You made him a hero," one director sneered during a meeting. "Now we're facing lawsuits and staff protests." Eleanor rubbed her temples. "We're cleaning a mess that's been ignored for years," she said. "Marcus didn't create this. He exposed it." Later that evening, Eleanor received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You should know what your ex-employee is planning." Attached were screenshots of the crew's private chat, including Samantha's threats and the forged rumors. Eleanor's heart sank. She immediately called Marcus. "Mr. Reed," she said when he answered, "I believe someone is trying to harm your reputation. We're sending our legal team to handle it, but I thought you should know." Marcus thanked her quietly. "I expected this, but I appreciate your honesty," he said. The next day, he decided to confront the situation head-on, instead of denying or attacking. Marcus did something few expected. He recorded a short video message sitting in his office wearing a simple gray suit. He spoke directly to the camera. "In life," he began, "you can be right and still be hated for it. You can speak the truth and still be misunderstood. I didn't want anyone punished. I wanted awareness, but if integrity cost me my reputation, I'm willing to pay that price." The video was short, only 2 minutes, but it exploded online. His calm tone and honest words silenced critics faster than any PR campaign could. Within hours, millions had shared it. The comments flooded with support. This is how a real leader handles hate. One user wrote, "He turned humiliation into humanity." Another said, "Samantha watched the video that night, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. Anger, guilt, and something else she couldn't name. She had expected him to fight back, to destroy her. Instead, he forgave her without naming her. That quiet mercy hurt more than any punishment could." 2 days later, the airline's HR department called her in. They presented the screenshots and informed her of permanent dismissal. Samantha sat in silence. The weight of her choices finally settled in. She whispered, "He never even mentioned my name." Meanwhile, Marcus received a call from Eleanor. "The investigation is closed," she said. "The crew responsible for the rumors has been terminated, and we've set new cyber ethics guidelines. Also, the board approved the Respect Initiative globally. Every branch, every crew, every station." Marcus listened quietly. "Good," he said. "That means we're learning." But the story didn't end there. The scandal had transformed into something much larger, a corporate shift across multiple airlines who now reviewed their ethics policies. Conferences invited Marcus to speak. Universities quoted his words in leadership classes. And yet, he never once mentioned names or pointed fingers. That night, Marcus stood alone on his hotel balcony overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, and the noise of London hummed below. He thought of Samantha, of forgiveness, and of how pain often teaches faster than power. He whispered to himself, "Revenge is loud, but redemption is silent." And somewhere deep down, he knew that even storms have purpose. They clear the sky for a brighter sunrise. By the time autumn leaves began to fall, Marcus Reed's story had traveled far beyond the clouds. What started as a tense encounter on a transatlantic flight had transformed into a worldwide movement. Governments, corporations, and ordinary workers were all talking about the same thing: respect. The video Marcus had recorded, calm and simple, had been translated into more than 20 languages. Business schools dissected it in lectures, CEOs quoted it in boardrooms, and even small cafe owners pinned his words on their walls. "Integrity doesn't need a microphone." One of his quotes read, "It just needs consistency." Inside his office overlooking the River Thames, Marcus scrolled through hundreds of emails. Some were from young professionals who said his stance gave them courage to speak up. Others were from companies wanting to consult with him on leadership ethics. Clara entered with her usual tablet. "Sir," she said, "we've received invitations from 3 major airlines, 2 universities, and the World Business Council." Marcus smiled faintly. "All because of one sandwich," he said softly. But he wasn't mocking, he was reflecting. That moment in the sky had exposed a global truth. The world had learned to measure people by titles and tickets, yet forgotten the simplest measure: humanity. In New York, a journalist prepared a major feature titled, "The Flight That Changed Corporate Culture." It traced Marcus's journey from a boy raised by a teacher mother in Detroit to the man who had sparked a revolution without raising his voice. He didn't demand equality through anger. The article read, "He reminded the world that empathy is good business." Meanwhile, back in London, the airline that had once wronged him had fully embraced reform. Their Respect and Inclusion initiative became an international benchmark. Flight attendants began each training cycle by watching Marcus's video. Some even referred to it as the moment of sky change. But the ripples didn't stop there. Hospitality chains, tech companies, hospitals, and schools began to adopt similar programs. The movement became known as the Reed Standard, a term coined by a management professor who described it as the measure of silent integrity and leadership. At first, Marcus resisted the attention. He didn't want to become a symbol. He just wanted to remind people that leadership wasn't about control. It was about care. But eventually, he realized the message had grown beyond him. It belonged to the world now. One morning, he received an unexpected call from the United Nations Business Council, inviting him to speak at a global summit on corporate ethics. Marcus agreed reluctantly. He had never liked the spotlight, but he knew this was a platform to plant seeds for lasting change. The day of the speech, the auditorium buzzed with journalists and CEOs. Marcus walked to the podium in his quiet, measured way. He didn't read from notes. His words flowed naturally. When I was a young man, he said, I thought power was about being heard. But over the years, I learned something different. True power is about listening. You can change policies, markets, even nations. But unless you change how you treat people, your success is empty. The audience sat in absolute silence. His voice carried the same calm force that had silenced millions online. One flight, he continued. One careless tone. That was all it took to reveal how far we still need to go. But change doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it whispers. And you must be still enough to hear it. When he finished, the crowd rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. Eleanor Briggs, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears. Later, she approached him and said softly, You turned our shame into our strength. Marcus smiled gently. That's what storms do, Eleanor. They wash away the dirt so growth can begin. In the following months, Marcus's foundation, the Reed Initiative for Workplace Dignity, partnered with schools and organizations worldwide. They developed empathy-based leadership programs. He personally funded scholarships for students studying social ethics and corporate psychology. Yet even with global recognition, Marcus remained the same. He still visited his mother's small home in Detroit every few months, sitting with her on the porch as she poured tea. The world's proud of you, she said once, smiling. I hope they're proud of themselves too, he replied, because it means they listened. But not everyone celebrated. Some powerful figures in rival corporations saw him as a threat. He's changing the narrative, that one executive complained at a board meeting. People don't fear authority anymore, they expect decency. Unknowingly, Marcus had ignited a quiet revolution, one that couldn't be stopped. His name became synonymous with fairness. His story taught people that dignity didn't depend on wealth or race, but on the simple act of treating others right. As winter approached, Marcus stood once again by a window overlooking a quiet skyline. The lights reflected on the glass like stars. Clara entered with one last update. Sir, she said, the airline renamed their Employee Excellence Award after you. It's now called the Marcus Reed Honor of Service. He turned, surprised, then chuckled softly. That's humbling, he said, but they should name it after every passenger who was ever overlooked. They're the reason I spoke up. Clara smiled. And that's exactly why they chose your name. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and quiet, just like the way Marcus had changed the world, not with fury but with grace. The world now admired Marcus Reed as a living symbol of integrity. His calm defiance on that flight had changed how millions viewed leadership, respect and power. But as his influence grew, so did the shadows around him. Success, Marcus had learned, never traveled alone. It always carried envy as a silent passenger. It began quietly, with whispers. A few disgruntled executives from his competitors began meeting in boardrooms. Irritated by the global attention Marcus received, he's changing corporate culture, but he's making the rest of us look heartless, one of them said, tapping a cigar against the glass table. Another added, we can't fight him openly. The world adores him. But what if we make the world doubt him? Their plan was slow, deliberate. A campaign built not on lies, but on twisted truths. They started leaking old financial documents from Marcus's early business years, taking minor accounting mistakes and spinning them into tales of corruption. The headlines began to shift tone subtly. The perfect CEO, or a carefully built illusion? One magazine asked when Clara brought the article to Marcus's desk. She looked worried. Sir, this one's different. They've attached real numbers but twisted the meaning. Marcus read it quietly, his face unreadable. Let them print, he said finally. The truth doesn't fear ink. Still, Clara saw the weariness in his eyes. For years he had stood like an oak tree in a storm, calm, unmoving, forgiving. But now the winds were stronger, colder. This wasn't about public opinion anymore. It was about trust, and trust, once cracked, could take years to mend. Soon after, another blow came. One of Marcus's longtime partners, a logistics executive from Singapore, suddenly withdrew from a major deal. I'm sorry, Marcus, he said over video call. Investors are uneasy. There's too much noise around you. Marcus nodded. I understand, he replied calmly. Noise fades. Character doesn't, but inside he felt the sting for the first time. His principles were costing him more than he had imagined. That evening, he drove alone to the edge of the city, parking near the river that shimmered beneath London's lights. He stood by the water, his reflection rippling in the current. He remembered his mother's words, spoken long ago on another dark night. Son, storms don't destroy roots, they test them. He took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered to himself. Then let the storm come. The next morning, he gathered his senior team. They want us to defend, but we'll do something different, he said. We'll open every book, every file, every number. We'll invite scrutiny, not avoid it. It was a bold move. Within a week, Marcus's company launched the Transparency Portal, a public online platform displaying full access to their financials, supply chains, and ethical audits. The business world was stunned. He's insane, one critic said. No one exposes that much, but the people loved it. Customers, employees, and even journalists praised the honesty. What had been meant to destroy his image became a mirror showing everyone else's flaws. Still, the unseen enemies didn't give up. One night, a hacker group broke into his company's data servers, leaking private correspondence between Marcus and Eleanor Briggs, the airline CEO. They twisted their friendly tone into rumors of favoritism and backroom deals. The news spread fast. Reed and Briggs, corporate corruption behind the respect movement, screamed the headlines for the first time. Marcus's silence broke. He called a press conference, cameras filled the room, reporters buzzing with anticipation. When he stepped to the podium, his voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. I've stayed silent when insulted, he began. I've stayed patient when doubted. But I won't stay quiet when truth itself is manipulated. The letters you've seen were between two professionals working to build better ethics in business. There's no crime in collaboration, but there is in fabrication. He paused, letting the words sink in. If the world doubts my integrity, then I accept that test. But I will never allow deceit to become normal. The next day, public opinion began to turn once again. Analysts called it the calm counterattack, and social media flooded with support. People admired his refusal to play dirty. His transparency became his shield. Eleanor called him that evening, Marcus. You handled that beautifully, she said. They underestimated you, he smiled faintly. They always do, Eleanor. Because they mistake silence for surrender. Weeks later, government watchdogs reviewed the leaked data and publicly cleared him of all allegations. The media that had doubted him now celebrated him again. Reed passes every test, the headlines read, but Marcus didn't celebrate. He simply looked out his office window at the evening sky. The sun setting beyond the glass reminded him of flight paths. Steady, forward, never stopping integrity, he whispered, isn't about being unbreakable. It's about choosing not to bend when the world wants you to. That night, Clara found him still working late. Sir, she said softly, what do we call this phase of the story? Marcus smiled. The test, he said, and we passed it. Outside, the city glowed like a runway in the dark, and Marcus knew his journey had not ended. It had simply climbed to higher altitude, where the air was thinner, the vision clearer, and the stakes greater than ever. The storm Marcus Reed had started months ago seemed to be settling, yet beneath the calm surface another kind of tension was brewing. His name had become a symbol of fairness across continents, quoted in classrooms, printed in journals, even referenced in government policies. But with influence came scrutiny, and not everyone believed in his quiet revolution. In the polished halls of a global airline consortium in Geneva, a secret meeting took place. Executives from rival airlines sat around a long mahogany table. The topic wasn't business expansion, it was Marcus Reed. He's interfering with corporate freedom, one senior executive snapped. His so-called Reed standard is making employees question their managers. He's turning staff into critics, another leaned back with a smirk. Then maybe it's time to remind the world that he's not perfect. Within days, subtle attacks began. Anonymous articles appeared online questioning Marcus's wealth and business ethics. One headline read, "Is the world's most ethical CEO hiding a dark secret?" Others accused him of hypocrisy, claiming his company exploited workers in developing countries. None of it was true, but the story spread fast. When Clara entered his office that morning, her face was tense. Sir, the press is attacking your reputation. They've linked your name to a supply chain issue that doesn't even belong to us. Marcus looked up from his desk, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Let them speak," he said softly. Lies echo loudly before they fade. Still, he knew this battle was different. It wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about the soul of integrity itself. That evening, while the rain tapped gently on the glass walls of his London office, Marcus opened a file on his laptop. Inside were messages from factory workers in Kenya, thanking him for ensuring fair wages and safety standards. One line stood out: "Because of your foundation, my children can go to school." He closed the laptop slowly, letting the words ground him. The next day, his legal team gathered. "We can sue for defamation," one lawyer said. "We can clear your name in court." Marcus shook his head. "No, I won't fight dirt with dirt. If I start defending my image, I'll lose my purpose. People will believe what they want. The truth will survive on its own." Meanwhile, Eleanor Briggs and the airline CEO who once apologized to him called from New York. "Marcus, these accusations are political," she warned. "They're scared of what you represent." He smiled faintly. "Then I must be doing something right." But the attacks intensified. Investors began pulling out. Board members grew anxious. The foundation's projects slowed as sponsors hesitated for the first time. Marcus felt the weight of isolation pressing against his calm resolve. One night, Clara found him still in the office long after midnight, staring out at the city lights. "Sir," she said softly. "We could issue a statement or at least respond publicly." Marcus turned slowly, his voice low but steady. "Clara, remember something. When you walk through a storm with silence, every step becomes a lesson for someone watching. Let them see patience win." The next morning, something unexpected happened. A group of factory workers, students, and airline trainees gathered outside his office holding banners. "We stand with Reed. Truth needs no defense. Integrity over image." The movement he had inspired had come full circle. This time, the people were his shield. They spoke online, shared real testimonies, and flooded news outlets with evidence of his transparency and kindness. The false stories collapsed under the weight of truth. By the end of the week, the media that once tried to destroy him now called it the Integrity Rebellion. Marcus never responded to interviews, but when asked for a comment, he simply said, "I didn't defend myself, others defended the truth." That's how you know your cause was real. His reputation rebounded stronger than before. The same executives who plotted against him now faced backlash from their own employees, demanding the Reed standard be implemented in one particularly poetic twist. The Geneva consortium that had tried to discredit him sent an official invitation months later, asking Marcus to lead a seminar on corporate ethics. He laughed quietly when he read it. "From sabotage to seminars," he murmured. "Life has a sense of humor." At the seminar, standing before the same faces that once conspired in secret, Marcus spoke without bitterness. "I forgive you," he said simply, "because every storm you sent my way only made my foundation stronger." The room was silent. Even the proudest executives lowered their heads. That night, as Marcus and Clara walked along the river, the city lights shimmered like reflections of peace. "You never raised your voice, and yet the world listened," Clara said softly. He smiled gently. "Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to endure." And with that, Marcus realized something profound. The flight that had begun in the clouds had never truly ended. It had become a journey across hearts and minds, carrying a message that could not be grounded. Respect wasn't just a lesson anymore. It had become a legacy. Years had passed since that fateful morning aboard Flight 409, yet its echoes still traveled through the world like a living memory. What had begun as a quiet act of dignity had grown into a global philosophy. People in boardrooms, classrooms, and even small community halls now referred to it as the Reed Principle, a movement born not from anger, but from calm courage. Marcus Reed's foundation had expanded into more than 40 countries, training young leaders to build empathy-driven workplaces. Airports displayed posters quoting his words, "Every person you serve is a mirror of your own respect." The airline that once wronged him had become one of the most ethical carriers in the world, and each new employee, before their first flight, still watched his 2-minute video, the one recorded in his quiet office so long ago. Marcus, however, had stepped away from the spotlight. He preferred quiet mornings now, tending to his small garden on the outskirts of London. His hair had begun to silver, but his eyes still held the calm fire that had once silenced storms. Clara, still his closest associate and now head of the Reed Initiative, often visited him, bringing updates and laughter. One crisp autumn morning, she arrived with news. "Sir," she said with a wide smile, "the United Nations has decided to honor you with the Global Humanity Award." Marcus looked up from trimming his roses. "An award?" he said softly. "I thought the work itself was the reward." Clara laughed. "You always say that, but this one's special. They're naming it after you, the Marcus Reed Medal for Ethical Leadership." He paused, the breeze brushing his face. "Then it doesn't belong to me," he said. "It belongs to every person who learned that respect isn't earned by wealth or title, but by choice." A few weeks later, the ceremony took place in New York. The hall was filled with world leaders, innovators, and thousands of young professionals. When Marcus walked onto the stage, the crowd rose in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. He stood at the podium quietly until the applause faded. "When I boarded that flight years ago," he began, "I wasn't trying to start a movement, I just wanted breakfast, but fate had a different menu prepared." The audience laughed softly, and he smiled. "I was served disrespect instead, and I realized something powerful. Sometimes life doesn't hand you comfort, it hands you purpose." He looked around the room. "That moment taught me that silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom waiting for its time to speak. And when you finally do speak, make sure it's not out of revenge, but out of reason." The audience listened in stillness, tears glistening in many eyes. "I don't stand here as a hero," he continued. "I stand here as proof that one act of dignity can ripple through generations. Respect is the cheapest gift you can give, yet the richest legacy you can leave." After the ceremony, dozens of attendees lined up to meet him, students, activists, pilots, and executives. One young woman wearing a flight attendant's uniform approached nervously. "Mr. Reed," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. My mother was Samantha, the attendant from your flight." Marcus's expression softened. The hall grew quiet. "She passed away last year," the woman continued. "But before she did, she told me to find you one day and say she was sorry. She spent her last years helping others through kindness. Said she learned the meaning of humanity from you." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he reached out and took her hand gently. "Tell her spirit she was forgiven long ago," he said softly. "Sometimes the hardest lessons create the strongest souls." The young woman smiled through tears. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, as Marcus sat in his hotel room overlooking the glittering skyline, he thought about how life had come full circle. The world had changed, not through grand speeches or power, but through a single quiet decision to remain dignified when it would have been easier to fight. He opened his old leather journal and wrote one final line beneath the many pages of reflections. "Respect travels farther than wings." Months later, when he retired from public life, the Marcus Reed Medal continued to be awarded annually. It became the most respected symbol of integrity in business and governance. Every year, recipients ended their acceptance speeches the same way, quoting his timeless words, "Revenge is loud, but redemption is silent." Years later, when Marcus passed peacefully in his sleep, the news spread around the world. Cities dimmed their billboards for a minute of silence. Airlines grounded flights briefly in tribute. Pilots carried passengers safely through the clouds under the call sign Flight 409 Memorial Route. But his true legacy wasn't in awards or headlines. It lived in the hearts of people who chose kindness when they could have chosen cruelty. In the workers who greeted strangers with warmth, in leaders who listened more than they spoke. In a generation that learned from him that dignity never expires, and high above the clouds where it all began, every passing plane seemed to whisper his lesson back to the earth below. That respect, once given, never lands. It just keeps flying, forever.